Now we're going to try to show you the critical points of running permeability on a compacted asphalt sample. This is VTM 120 in your specifications. There's two ways you can calculate your final permeability. One way would be a single point method, and to do that you would have to test 5 separate samples. The minimum air void content on those 5 samples is 7.5%. But the key point is all 5 samples have to be within 1% air voids. An alternative method of calculating your permeability, and which may show you more about your mix as to when the permeability truly begins to fail, is when you do what's called a regression method. For that method, you would run, there's no limit on the air void content. They just want you to have a range of air voids in your specimens so that you get a good regression method to be able to do your plot. Once we've made our pills, which is we've already seen how to make pills before, this happens to be a 9.5 inch and a half tall at 7.5% air voids. First thing you have to do before you can run the actual permeability test with the Permeameter here is you have to saturate your sample. To do that, we use our same rice vacuum and container we do our rice tests in. There are a spacer on the bottom of this. It's a couple nuts that is creating a space on the bottom of our sample before we place it in the bucket. We lower our sample in here, and we have to add enough water to be 1 inch above the sample. Anytime you're doing lab testing with water, it's recommended you use the water that's in your weigh bath. The reason being is that should be at a constant temperature of 77 degrees Fahrenheit. So this water did come out of our weigh bath earlier, and this water is at 77 degrees. I'll be using the same 77 degree water when I actually run my permeability test. All right, now that I've put my sample in here and it's covered in water, I'm going to step back here to my rice vacuum to begin the saturation. All right, notice that I have this bucket sitting on my lab counter. There's no reason, like when you run a rice, you vibrate your sample, you shake your sample. When we're saturating a pill, there's no reason for any shaking. So we can set it right on the counter, put our vacuum lid on, press down, close it off, start the vacuum. My manometer, I'm targeting 90 millimeters of mercury. We want to vacuum this at 90 plus or minus 2 millimeters for 15 minutes. All right, now that we've vacuumed our sample for 15 minutes, it needs to stand in this water, in the bath somewhere, for a minimum of 5 minutes before we can actually run the test. While this sits idle for 5 minutes, we're going to prepare the Permeameter. To do that, we first need to fill the bottom of our Permeameter so that the water is at the bottom of the outlet pipe. Again, with the 77 degree water. All right, now I'm going to close off my valve. And I'm ready to load my Permeameter. I've already taken the sleeve or the collar, hooked it up to the vacuum side of the Permeameter, and I've pulled a vacuum on the membrane. That is so that it's easier for me to load my specimen. In order to prevent any water from leaking along the sides of the membrane rather than going through the specimen, the outside of this specimen needs to be coated with some sort of petroleum jelly or Vaseline. Just take your Vaseline with your hand, and I don't know of a better way of doing this than just using your hand, and wipe it along the edges. Doing this, you want to use care not to get any of the Vaseline on the top of the bottom of the sample. You're just coating the circumference. All right. Looks pretty good. Now we'll load our sample in our Permeameter. I like to go ahead and put the top on before I load the collar over. Seems to slide over better for me. All right, once I've done that, put this on. Line everything up. You just want to tighten this down till it's good and snug. Then I want to move my hose here from vacuum to pressure. And I'm going to apply a confining pressure of 14 plus or minus 1. The dial gauge only goes to 15, so that's typically where I start at. It's about 15 in case pressure drops off at all during the test. There we go. Now we'll insert our Permeameter tube. Make sure it's seated in there well. All right, now we're going to fill the Permeameter with water. Remember, this water comes out of our weigh bath. It's approximately 77 degrees. And there's really no good way to do this. It does say in the test method to induce as little air as possible. Talking about air in the water, that's another reason I like to use the water in my weigh bath. That water is pretty much it's not coming from the tap. Most taps have an aerator on top of it, which introduces air into the water. All right, I got that plenty full for a reason. Before I actually start my timer, I need to lean this back and forth a couple times to remove any air that could be trapped on top of the specimen and above. Here goes an air bubble now, the top collar of the Permeameter here. So I just tilt this left and right, and it's not unusual to see an air bubble or two come out at this time. There goes a couple. Do this a couple times. All right. Now I'm ready to begin my actual permeability test. To do this, I have to time how long it takes water to travel from 63 on my scale here, from 63 to 0. My timer will just be a stopwatch on my cell phone. All right, I'm going to start this timer once it hits 63. All right, time will continue to the bottom mark here, or 0, or until 10 minutes and time has elapsed. If you have a sample that's rather impermeable, your 10 minutes may be up here somewhere, and you can stop any test at 10 minutes. Otherwise, you'll allow the water to go all the way to the bottom timing mark. All right, you stop your timer at the bottom timing mark. For this one, we had 8 minutes and 8 seconds. You have to fill this tube up with water minimum of 3 times. So you run 3 Permeameters on the same sample, same specimen. It's important to also note the temperature of your water. Temperature of your water needs to be recorded in Celsius, or if you record it in Fahrenheit, you can convert it to Celsius. Once you have your average of your 3 times and your temperature of your water, you go to the Excel spreadsheet that VDOT provides you. This will do the calculation for you. It's not a calculation you want to attempt longhand. It's a real involved calculation. Once you put your data in your Excel spreadsheet, you will be given a number for permeability. As long as you pass in 150 times 10 to the minus 5, you have passing permeability for your sample.